Mass protests against Trump's immigration enforcement have been taking place across the country for weeks. But my next guest has a proposal for a way to send a message that the president cannot ignore: a big tech boycott. Scott Galloway writes, we must recognize that he is unfazed by citizen outrage, the courts, or the media. He responds to one thing: the market. Scott Galloway, marketing professor at NYU Stern School of Business, joins me now. He is also a New York Times bestselling author and co-host of the Raging Moderates podcast and Prof G Markets podcast, and of course, Pivot. Okay, Scott, my dear friend, first I would say I agree with you that if Donald has one daddy, it's the bond market. But could you just give some credit? When you say citizen outrage, look at how extraordinary the people of Minneapolis have been. Far braver and bolder than any CEO in this country. And we're seeing the president somewhat take notice.
Yeah, I want to be clear. Political parties don't foment change. People do. And the protests are inspiring. And I think it's just healthy to do something like this with other people. I think it's an additive or a cumulative effect, not an either or. So in a way, I think of honoring the good people who give up their Saturday and, quite frankly, sometimes are putting themselves in physical harm's way and giving up time with their family to protest, is to say, well, shouldn't I, at a minimum, maybe go from 2 LLMs to 1, from 6 streaming platforms to 1, take the tube or the subway a little bit more and cancel my ride hailing? Do I really need to be a subscriber to Amazon Prime through February? So I see
but
this
just break
as,
that down. Like walk
Sure.
us through this concept, because until now, or at least in Trump 2.0, CEOs seem to be happy, right? They get what they want out of the White House. The markets aren't punishing them. So they're burying their heads in the sand.
Yeah, so let's talk numbers. The S&P, 40% of the S&P is now a small number of companies, big tech, that are largely subscription-based. If you really want to hurt or send a message to the president, he listens to markets, as you referenced. So how do you do that? How do you go after the soft issue? If you cancel, say you have Anthropic and ChatGPT, and you decide to cancel ChatGPT, $20 a month, $240. OpenAI is raising money at an $800 billion market cap, 20 billion revenues. That's 40 times revenues. So your $240 less of subscription revenues translates to approximately $10,000 in market capitalization. The easiest way to send a strong signal to the markets and to the president is to go after the most fully valued companies whose CEOs have his ear and have enabled him. So if you want to have the maximum impact on your effort, and I'm not suggesting that protests or staying home from work aren't really powerful, but the easiest thing for people around America to do to have a real impact is to decide, do they need 2 LLMs? Do they need 6 streaming platforms? And it's a small price to pay and a nod to the good people in Minneapolis to say, as long as there are people, a secret police with masks on, I can do with fewer recurring revenue subscription programs. And the markets will feel this and the president will feel this. So I'm talking about, I've struggled my whole life, Stephanie, with the difference between being right and being effective. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we could send a message to the markets and the president that what is going on here is a total attack on American values. And I think the string we can pull here is to go after the subscription revenues of big tech that now represents 40% of the S&P.
I want to ask you about another message that I think went out to the American people, I think loud and clear, yesterday. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made a personal visit to the Blue Origin headquarters and was greeted by none other than its founder, Jeff Bezos. This is days after Amazon paid $40 million for the rights to Melania. She was paid tens of millions of dollars. They spent tens of millions of dollars marketing this film. Is this the access Bezos is paying for? Because Blue Origin is his big business that loses huge amounts of money and could certainly benefit from government contracts.
This is pure grift, and I want to create an analogy, a dark one. In early 30s Germany, a lot of the titans of the manufacturing industry in Germany essentially said to Hitler, if you crush the unions and make us more profitable, we'll ignore this slow burn to fascism. And then when it kind of got out of control, it was too late. And I see the same thing here. Notice how these big tech companies are not subject to tariffs, that Apple was somehow able to get out of these tariffs. We're even talking now about some sort of bill that might back with the full faith of the U.S. government some of these huge infrastructure investments. When Tim Cook goes to the premiere with an inscribed hard disk drive, when Amazon overpays for the Melania documentary, this is pure pay for play. When the Ellison family says to Warner shareholders, you should accept our bid because it's more likely to go through because I'm a Republican donor and have my head so far up the orifice of the president you can't see my legs, that is an admission by these individuals that they now recognize the government is pay for play. And you've probably heard from them, and so have I, via text message, that they hate themselves. I'm like, well, I hate you too. And until you speak out, this autocracy, kleptocracy that is enabling a slow burn to fascism from the people that he cares about and then the markets care about, they need to speak out. Enough is enough. This is leading us to a very dark place. And what I'm suggesting is an economy that is 70% consumer driven, that our hidden weapon that's been hiding in plain sight is our consumer spending. And if you want the biggest bang for the buck, go after big tech subscription services. It is not a huge price to pay, and it will have a big impact.
Now, let me be clear, Scott. I've heard from all of them, and it is absolute BS. Because if they want to get paid the big bucks and if they want to be on the big stage, then they have to do the right thing when it counts. You just wrote your last book was all about masculinity, and I've been thinking about you. I thought about you when I watched what happened to Renee Good. I thought about it with Alex Preddy. Your take on this version of masculinity that these ICE agents are portraying as they intimidate regular people, like brave mothers holding up cell phones in the face of armed ICE agents covered in masks.
This is what I really don't understand, Stephanie. I don't understand. The whole point of masculinity is you demonstrate skills and strength such that you can acquire influence and power. And then you move to the second leg of the stool of masculinity, and that is the whole shooting match is such that you can protect others. And for the life of me, I can't understand what the point is of aggregating the wealth of a small nation state if you don't immediately move to protection. What does it mean to be, why would you want to be the wealthiest man in the world when you're cutting off aid to HIV positive mothers? Why would you want to be the third wealthiest man in the world when you enable this type of depravity? Why would you want to be the CEO of the most valuable company in the world when you see that a lot of the rights and rule of law that helped you get to this point are directly under attack? I am literally befuddled. What is the point of acquiring all this strength if you're not going to move immediately to protecting other people, or at a minimum, nod to the principles, the rule of law, the anti-corruption laws that have made you a billionaire to begin with? It's literally pulling the ladder up behind you and setting it on fire. So I don't think
what's the point? What is the point of being one of the richest men in the world when in order for you to party and meet chicks, you need to be entertaining a man who is convicted of soliciting sex from a minor? But welcome to the United States in 2026. My last question before we go. Common Sense Media released a report ahead of the Super Bowl showing that more than a third of boys are now gambling before the age of 18. And of course, it is fueled by sports betting, social media, and video games. You and I have been talking about this since the early days of COVID, when boys were in their houses, in their mom's basements, online. How concerned are you?
The most profitable companies in the world are all trying to do one thing, and that is convince young men they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen with an algorithm. Why have friends when you have Reddit and Discord? Why engage in play or take risks in sports when you can gamble on the speed of the pitch? Why would you approach a stranger and express romantic interest when you have lifelike porn? We are literally developing a new species of asocial, asexual males, which has been tied to the profits of the S&P. These firms are not on our side, and what I would say to any young man or any young person is nothing wonderful will happen to you on a screen. You need to get out, in my view, be around other people, maybe even drink more, and I've gotten some pushback on that, and make a series of bad decisions that might pay off. Nothing wonderful is going to happen to you at home and on a screen.